What is it like inside one of Ukraine's elite brigades fighting in Zaporizhzhia? Video from United 24 is going to give us an inside look, and we are going to look and do some analysis of just how much it takes to run a combined arms brigade at this scale. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's get right into it. Okay, as always, guys, link is in the description. And we had to fast forward through the first 10 seconds because there's a bunch of combat footage and YouTube is clear. Combat footage bad.
Summer is ending, but military operations in the south of Ukraine are just approaching their climax. We were lucky to get access to the so-called Iron Cavalry, the spearhead at the forefront of the Ukrainian campaign.
The 47th Mechanized Brigade has been in the vanguard of Ukrainian counteroffensive for many months now. And we're about to see the machine that helps the soldiers to attack and to successfully push the enemy in one of the most challenging directions. Meet the legendary Leopard 2 A6.
Next to us is the Leopard 2 A6, a German tank, which the Germans say is the best in the world.
Now, there's a couple of advantages to using a German tank, especially a Leopard A26 or 2A6. The first is that the Leopard is a good modern main battle tank. Originally built in the 70s, it served in West Germany and has easily a dozen different manufacturers. It also runs only about 5 million USD. A new one runs about 13 million. But at $6 million a pop, it's a very affordable main battle tank. This is something that the U.S. basically doesn't care about, but other countries with actual constraints on their defense budgets do. For context, right, an Abrams M1 is around $10 million. Oh, when including training and upkeep. That's less relevant, right? But it looks like a per unit cost is around, let's see, this is $6 million, but in $1999. Adjusted forward, it's about $9 million. So you can afford almost 2 Leopards for the price of a Abrams. And that is not insignificant. It's also worth noting that because there's so many manufacturers, parts and maintenance are actually exceptionally easy. Even more so given that the tank is manufactured in Germany, which can easily and over rail and land be transported to Ukraine. Because remember, you're not just getting a tank, you're getting what's called a logistics tail. That's going to include a bunch of parts. But let's talk more. Let's take a look.
The tank is good, maneuverable, and fast. It moves back and forth at very high speeds. It shoots very accurately. It hits the bullseye at 4 kilometers.
Yeah, 4 kilometers is huge, guys. To give you some context in the battlefield map, I know I've done this in another video, but I think it's so fascinating to give you an idea of where 4 kilometers can get you in terms of distance. So when we pull up this here, right here is where the fighting is heaviest. And let's say Ukrainian forces wanted to hit one of these units stationed in Novoprokopivka. A Leopard could be literally on almost the other side of the village of Robtina. So you could position it literally quite a distance from the front lines, right? If your goal was to just keep it away from Russian frontline forces, you could get it literally as deep into Russian or Ukrainian lines as here. Keep it under cover and then deploy it out, engage targets. So imagine being able to cover infantry from beyond their line of sight, right? Imagine you're an infantryman advancing and you suddenly see just sabot rounds just crushing tanks and personnel here, covering your advance, despite the fact that the tank is literally, you can barely see it at 4 kilometers. Again, reality engagements are going to be closer because there's obstacles, there's concealment, terrain is weird, but it's interesting to know that that's even in the realm of possibility.
The role of this tank is to support and cover breakthroughs of the mechanized assault squads. Since June 2023, Vitaly and his crew have been fighting in the Zaporizhzhia region in this strategically crucial direction, Orikhiv, Tokmak, Melitopol. It is precisely where Russian forces prepared their most advanced and complex layer defenses. For this tank crew, this was the hottest summer of their lives.
We head out and cover the Bradleys. We mainly work on infantry, on fortifications. But when we spot equipment, that's not a problem for us either.
Right. So this is worth noting that we've seen in Russian tactics in the past that they are being very sparing, very conservative with their use of their remaining armored forces. There's very few, and frankly, armored forces just aren't quite as effective on the defense. But when he talks about covering the mechanized forces, guys, remember in NATO parlance, mechanized refers to light infantry troops being carried by, in most cases, a Bradley or an infantry fighting vehicle, something that is comparable in armor, speed, and mobility to a tank. So mechanized infantry are infantry meant to fight with tanks. And sometimes they, though the NATO doesn't really do it as much, they'll use the term motorized to describe infantry mounted in cars and less armored vehicles.
This is an armor-piercing 120 caliber shell. It penetrates any enemy vehicle.
So you see the top, that point there is actually the, this is like the sabot round. This is well, it's the armor-piercing part, but this sheath falls away when it hits the vehicle. I believe this could be one of the depleted uranium rounds, but that the U.S. sometimes provides, though this is also could be made of like tungsten, an extremely unbelievably hard metal that's meant to cut through the comparatively soft steel of Russian tank armor.
Vitaly previously served as a tank commander on a Soviet-made T-72. His new workhorse is superior in speed, accuracy, sight capabilities, and armor. The latter is the most important.
Okay, here's what I find pretty interesting. First, it's classic in militaries, right? You train your troops on a more general unit, and then when you're ready to graduate them to an elite unit or a platform, in this case, that is just less available, you're going to draw from that pool of high performers in this case, T-72s. And this is exactly how the U.S. selects its special forces soldiers, right? While it is possible to go directly into the special forces from just enlisting, in almost every case, individuals selected for teams, they are going to come from what's called the operational force, meaning that they spend 2, 3, 4, 5 years in regular Army units, learning and proving that they are highly effective before transitioning and trying out for special forces selection. That way you get a more mature soldier, sure, but you also don't have to worry about the biggest, gooberiest, deluded people, right? We all knew the kid in high school who was unathletic, not that smart, maybe even had like asthma or issues that were just disqualifying a military service, and they were convinced that they were going to be a special forces soldier. And getting rid of that sort of level of like delusion, it saves resources, but it also ensures that those limited spots are going to go to people who've actually proven themselves. Again, it's less common now, but when I was on active duty, it would be expected de facto that if you wanted to try out for an SF team or selection, you would basically, it was considered you were supposed to have a combat deployment, right?
Here in the Zaporizhzhia region, each square meter is dangerous, with enemy TGMs hidden in the tree lines, loitering munitions in the air, and mines in the ground.
It's interesting. Loitering munition seems to be a informal doctrinal term for the drone munitions, right? These are drones that will loiter, meaning they circle the skies of the battlefield looking for targets. And once those targets are spotted, the drones drop in and attack. Both sides are using them. It's a really interesting doctrinal concept that it's a very unique way to deny the enemy a large area of the battlefield.
Vitaly and his crew already experienced what is it like to be hit by a Russian Lancet UAV and run over an anti-tank mine. But as you see, the crew is strong and well, ready for the tasks ahead.
Okay, I want to point something out, guys. These helmets and these tanker helmets, there's a reason that tankers also have unique helmets, but generally, this is a Soviet-style tanker's helmet. And what you often see now in modern militaries is tankers have much more robust helmets. The reason is because when you hit an anti-tank mine, right, it's like the old saying, there's two hits. There's the tank hitting the mine and then your head hitting the tank, right? Imagine you've got these guys in a tank and you go like this, right? You shake the whole tank violently. Their heads are, the brain is in extreme danger with that much whiplash and kinetic forces running around. So for tank crew members, having a really padded, solid helmet is absolutely essential, right? These old style Soviet helmets, they're meant to prevent like knocks on the head. You know, if you're climbing into the tank and you go, ooh, ow, I didn't see that there. This is a perfect helmet for that, right? Those pads are like reinforced cotton, but reinforced cotton is not going to do a damn thing when, again, you run over 10 pounds of anti-tank mine, right? That's more than just I didn't see that bulkhead there. That you need a much more well-designed helmet system. Again, this isn't, this is, I don't know what has been provided with the Leopard tanks and if those helmets are compatible with what looks like the Leopard tanks' internal communication systems, but I'm just telling you why NATO troops choose to wear, not choose, they often don't have a choice, have to wear more robust combat helmets.
Experienced what is it like to be hit by a Russian Lancet UAV and run over an anti-tank mine. But as you see, the crew is strong and well, ready for the tasks ahead. In such rough conditions, there's no equipment that doesn't break down. And there's a huge effort being made behind the scenes in order to keep the brigade rolling.
Okay, look at this Alpha Chad mechanic right here. Guys, in case you're wondering, I'm sure when some units were deployed, this was a look, but this is not what you want to be looking like if you're doing maintenance work. Flip-flops, calf socks, Adidas track shorts, and just belly hanging out.
Here we are with
also, shout out to that guy. When the real alpha chadness of this is that this film crew came. They came to the maintenance shop and we're like, we're going to film the best maintainers in the Ukrainian military, you guys. And that dude was like, got it. You know, shirts off.
Maintenance battalion of the 47th Brigade. The guys here have to perform repairs of all kinds of vehicles, including the Soviet-made artillery, the German-made Leopards, the American-made Bradleys and Paladins, so they have plenty of work.
Guys, there is so much about this that is extremely challenging, right? So first off, every one of those is a totally different machine, right? If you've done any work on cars and know anything about cars, you know that if you know how to maintain one brand of car, you know how to maintain one brand of car. You know, the differences in design, maintenance, user ability is very different. And while each individual military often wants interoperability, right? They want, if you can take out the engine of one type of vehicle, they want you to be able to take out the engine of another. No such interoperability here. Totally different design traditions. Literally, Soviet versus NATO equipment couldn't be more different. Remember, Soviet designers and NATO designers never talked, never shared knowledge, only relied on occasional captured vehicles to inform each other about what the other was doing, which meant that their design philosophies were just vastly different. You also have the problem of the fact that you have to have the actual specialty knowledge and oftentimes specialty tools to perform a lot of these field maintenance tasks, right? So someone had to go and translate the step-by-step field manual from German to Ukrainian, from English to Ukrainian, in order to give these maintainers the knowledge they need to step-by-step diagnose, and fix a problem.
Our guys have got used to it. They formed their own repair teams. They know their job. They do everything very quickly, efficiently, and on time. Motivation plays an important role here.
I'm curious what he means by these guys form their own repair teams. I guess maybe it's like, I could see, for example, 3 guys that say, hey, you know what, we ran an auto body shop for 10 years together in Kiev or in Kharkiv. And so we said, yeah, we'll all go in to the 47th, but we all want to be together. We know how to run things. Or just maybe it's just a vibe thing. Like 3 dudes said, hey, we were all BMW mechanics. Like we all worked BMWs. That was our jam. And so we kind of get things. We kind of get each other. So I could see stuff like that working out for some of these folks. But it's also just hard. It's hard because you can't rely on the same 3 people being there, right? People rotate home, they get sick, they get tasked. For example, for let's say there was an emergency repair and it took 5 people. Well, somebody's team is going to be shorthanded. So yeah, you have these teams, but like, you know, in military operations, reality gets a vote.
After 1.5 months spent under Russian occupation in the Kharkiv region, Sergei made his way into the 47th Mechanized Brigade. For him, this experience became his personal motivation.
If we stop the repairs, our guys on the front line will miss just one piece of equipment and someone will die. So we keep working.
And here's the thing to remember, guys. It doesn't matter how good the tank crews are if there aren't tanks. So if you don't have great mechanics and great mechanic supervisors, it doesn't matter how good your tank crews are. Like, it's true, mechanics cannot fight. I mean, I guess probably they could, but like mechanics generally can't fight. But that is not like they're all constraints on the system, if that makes sense. And yes, it feels good to put down rounds down range, and it feels bad to have your life threatened by an AT mine or whatever. But being a mechanic in a military also sucks in its own different ways.
As they say, the show must go on.
And as we've seen, Ukraine has no problem targeting Russian depots and maintenance centers, and undoubtedly this maintenance center also is probably under some level of persistent threat.
Just like the repairs, the war doesn't stop. Day and night, the 47th continues to push and suppress the enemy with the goal to free the southern regions. A trusted Terran partner is here to help with this task.
Behind me you have the M109 A6 Paladin.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to blur that out.
Paladin howitzer, and the crew of this cannon now uses the Cluster Munitions provided by the United States. So we went out to find out how it affects the battlefield.
Yeah, FYI, guys, YouTube is going to demonetize me for definitely just even this. Anyway, I wanted to real quick shout out something I've been working on for almost a year. This is Strike Gum, right? Talking about the conflict in Ukraine. I wanted to find a way that I could help Ukraine at scale, more than just and try to build something that I thought was necessary. When I was in Afghanistan, I used to drink energy drinks all the time. We would order these ones called Rippets, and I would stuff like 2 or 3 of them in my pocket because I needed that energy to get myself going and ready to focus through long combat operations. So I finally worked with a manufacturer in Denver to find a way to concentrate an entire energy drink into a single piece of gum. 90 milligrams of caffeine in every piece. That's as much as a Red Bull, as much as an Amp Energy in each piece. But it's only $1 a piece. In fact, even less if you get the tray and you get the discount for subscribing. So if you're interested, you can go to strikegum.com. But most important, 50% of the profits from this first production run, I'm donating to Ukrainian charities that assist civilians who've been injured or displaced in the conflict. So again, if you're interested, go to strikegum.com or check the link in the description and get your Strike Gum today.
This is an M864 cluster munition with an electronic fuse. That means you can set the time when it should go off. It's very efficient.
Okay, this is the thing with cluster munitions, guys. Cluster munitions just mean that there are smaller explosives within each shell, right? So the single shell goes up, but then before it hits, it opens and then scatters these bomblets, they're called. They're little explosives. Like, think of them as hand grenades. And a wave of hand grenades are what actually hit the battlefield. And even then, the electronic fuse oftentimes allows these hand grenades to detonate just a little above the surface so that they scatter out a wide area of fragmentation. The result is that you take one artillery shell, which we've seen in videos, right? We've seen when if you're not directly hit by a 155 shell, you can get down and you can be okay. Cluster munitions, right, take that small area and they expand it greatly so that a single shell can blanket an area potentially like the size of a football field in dangerous fragmentation that can be devastating to infantry. So when Russian forces, especially advancing Russian forces who are out in the open and not in cover, when they get hit with these cluster munitions, it will stop their offensive dead. It'll stop their advance dead in its tracks. It's a great way to stop a counterattack, as we've seen. Russian forces struggle immensely now to make any kind of meaningful advance or do any kind of meaningful counterattacks. When we've seen them be way less effective at rolling back Ukrainian gains since cluster munitions were deployed.
Paladin by itself is a powerful weapon, so why does Ukraine need cluster munition? The answer is simple: it's effective. The enemy horde is just too big, and clusters are the best way to target an area, with no need to hit each and every infantryman.
Okay, we're probably going to have to censor some of this stuff here. I'm trying to make a note of where, again, YouTube censorship policies are really hard for me to get to the bottom of.
Our cluster munitions are used for their intended purpose. They are used in areas where it is confirmed that there are no civilians, that there is only either military equipment or military personnel. We report on all the shells used, which means each step is recorded.
And guys, this is a reference to the fact that one of the reasons cluster munitions are banned is because, unlike artillery, right, well, you fire one shell, it's either a dud or it's not. A cluster munition, in any given one of these shells, there's going to be, let's say let's say, one or two of those bomblets that don't work. They're going to land, but they're still going to be live. They're still going to pose a danger. And the danger is that when civilians move back into an area after the war, that they're going to encounter these, and civilians or unintended targets are going to be wounded or killed by these unexploded ordnance. Here's the thing with Ukraine, guys. If you haven't noticed, these areas, there's no areas with one or two. Every time I've seen cluster munition videos, it has been in an area pockmarked with regular artillery shells. And so artillery shells, of every 100 you fire, one or two, if they're US made, and if they are Soviet made, probably like 10 to 15 are going to be duds. They're not going to detonate. They're going to be dangerous UXO, which means these areas already have to be cleared before any civilians can do anything. That was already true of the battlefield. So I say this because cluster munitions are not going to make more areas need to be cleared, because there's no maybes when it comes to mine clearing. You either cleared an area every square inch or you didn't, period. So the risk is low. Plus, you have to understand, it's way different. This is not like, the U.S. using cluster munitions to drive out like the Iraqi Republican Guard, okay? Another country who doesn't want cluster munitions happening. This is a democratically elected leadership of a country operating in their own sovereign territory who says, we want this weapon. Totally morally different than to use it on a population that doesn't want it.
Стріляємо, є запис, куди він лягає, куди ми відпрацьовуємо.
M109 Paladin is the US Army primary tool of indirect fire support. Despite its range being up to 24 kilometers, the crew now works with the targets less than 10 kilometers away. The most recent success of the 47...
So I'll show you what 10 kilometers away looks like on the battlefield real quick. Pulling this up here. Okay, so 10 kilometers away is actually quite a ways. You can see, you can literally be positioned here. You can engage targets in Novoprokopivka and literally operate in areas where the Russian military never once occupied. That was never occupied by the Russian military throughout this entire conflict, right? And if you want to target Russian forces in these more near front lines, I mean, you can see, you can really have a lot of standoff distance, even at 10 kilometers, right? That's 10 kilometers. Now, if you wanted to take this thing out to its maximum range, right, you're going to lose some accuracy, 24 kilometers, you can see that literally you will be miles and miles away from the battlefield, right? If you wanted to engage, again, the furthest, most dug-in Russian positions. What am I doing here? If you wanted to dig in the furthest Russian positions, right? Strike deep, the furthest point of Russian lines, you could still be positioned beyond Orkhiv. So you see how this battlefield, right, there's the actual line of contact, but the actual line of much, much, much greater. Where's this? Okay, there we go.
7th Brigade is liberating the Robotine village, a strategically important point that lives just 20 kilometers to the city of Tokmak.
Just 20 kilometers, guys.
The Paladin now defends the roads to the village, shooting from 50 to stunning 100 rounds per day. When the infantry needs help, there's no room for economy. Despite the obstacles, the goals of the brigade never change. Move forward and liberate the Ukrainian south.
I do see that we are moving forward, but it's very difficult.
Рухаємося вперед. Але дуже важко.
Yeah, and that's been something that we've seen, guys. There is a lot of progress, but it is an absolute slog for Ukrainian forces. Anyway, that's all I had for you guys. Check us out at strikegum.com. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.